ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلوات الله وسلامه وبركاته عليه. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. أما بعد فإن خير الكلام كلام الله وأحسن هدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. As we start our first lesson in Kitab al-Siyam and Buloogh al-Maraam by the great illustrious Imam Al-Hafiz Ahmed ibn Ali ibn Hajar al-Asqalani rahimahullah, who died 852 after the Hijrah of Mustafa alayhi salatu wassalam, on this night, or the 27th night in March 2019, which coincides with the month of Rajab, or the 21st night of Rajab, 1440 after the Hijrah of Mustafa alayhi salatu wassalam. I guess allergy season is about to start, right? So we start in the Kitab al-Siyam, and we ask everyone if they can to bring Buloogh al-Maraam with them, Kitab al-Siyam. If they don't have Buloogh al-Maraam, it's easy with Lillahi alhamd to download the PDF, because the PDF is free. They can carry it on their phone if one does not have the book. But as far as I know, Abdul Mateen, our brother, if I'm not mistaken, that he sent some of the books, or he had a supply of the books in the office, if I'm not mistaken. That some of the books have arrived, so if one wants to have the book, it is available to be sold if one wants it. But in regards to Siyam, like I said, in preparation for Ramadan, and we start in Kitab al-Siyam. Kitab al-Siyam is not a long chapter in Buloogh al-Maraam. It's very concise and very summarized. But we will get into a lot of details, so it might be a little bit longer than usual. At the least, or excuse me, I'll say at the most, it would take us about maybe 3 weeks until we finish, inshallah. طيب. So you know, Bismillah, as we start Kitab al-Siyam, as the Siyam is Ar-Rukn al-Thalith min Arkan al-Islam. It is the third pillar of the religion of Islam, or rather it's the pillars in which the religion is found upon and built upon. As we know, Kitab al-Siyam, Siyam was made obligatory upon the Ummah, just as it was made obligatory upon the previous nations. As Allah Ta'ala has spoke about this affair in His book, O you who believe, as we know, we hear yearly. O you who believe that has been prescribed upon you fasting. As we know, the meaning of being prescribed, meaning it's been made obligatory. This has been made upon those before you in order that you may attain taqwa of Allah Ta'ala. As we know, these are ayats that are repetitious, in which I'm sure that everyone is familiar with. But just to remind, some people who attended or listened to the lesson might be a person that just entered the fold of Islam recently, so we take them in consideration likewise. So if information, walillahi alhamd, for those who already are familiar with some of the information that we will present, then now will be a revision for yourself to strengthen your knowledge, or just be review for that person. We know that Siyam, also likewise, that Siyam was made obligatory in the second year after the Hijrah of Mustafa alayhi salatu wasalam. And we know the message of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam that he fasted 9 months of Ramadan. 9 months of Ramadan, meaning 9 Ramadans, if you want to say for lack of better words, 9 Ramadanat, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam fasted until he died, alayhi salatu wassalam. As we know, ya ma'ashal ikhwa, the Siyam is a pillar of the religion in which it is built upon, where no one can deny its obligation. For denying its obligation, meaning having the belief that it is not obligatory, it is something that will necessitate for one to be left outside the fold of Islam, even if he was to fast. For firstly, it's incumbent upon one to have the absolute i'tiqad and conviction that it is obligatory to fast the month of Ramadan, and that it's not a choice in the matter unless one is excused due to a legislated excuse. What's the problem? On the ball. 209. As we know that the obligation of fasting is an affair, like we said, which is from Kitab and Sunnah and Ijma'. It is a consensus amongst the Sahaba, those who came after them. So there's no denial that for the obligation and the duty of performing this particular matter. As we talked about, and I'm sure that everyone is familiar with the hadith of Jibreel. The hadith of Jibreel, in which the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam talked about the a'mal al-zahira wal-batina, the actions of the heart, and the actions likewise of the limbs. All that was gathered in that one hadith, as we know. When Jibreel came to the Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam, and the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked the question, Jibreel asked the question, and the Messenger of Allah answered, and Jibreel confirmed. He says, Na'am sadaqt. There's in the hadith, as we know, in Jibreel, that it started off with the affairs of a'mal, al-zahira. When the Prophet ﷺ was asked, well, first he asked him, what is Islam? Islam is what? What is Islam, as it mentions in the hadith? No, alhamdulillah. What is it? What was mentioned? جيد. تشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأن محمد رسول الله وإقام الصلاة وإيتاء الزكاة وتصوم رمضان استطعت إليه سبيلا. When the Messenger of Allah ﷺ was asked about the affairs pertaining to the Shahada and also pertaining to the Salah, the Siyam, the Zakah, and all those matters, that is al-a'mal al-zahira. As we know, that is the actions that are done outwardly. It's incumbent upon one to profess. Then he talked about the articles of faith, which is the a'mal al-qulub, al-a'mal al-batina, the actions that are done inwardly, meaning with the heart. Where it was mentioned, it said, and tu'mina billah, that you believe in Allah and His books and His messengers and His prophets and the last day and the qadr. That is all pertaining to the a'mal of what? Al-qulub, meaning the conviction. That's pertaining to the what? The actions of the heart, which is also pertaining to the belief system. The belief system, which is the most important. As we know that the actions that are done outwardly will not be correct if the actions of the heart is not what? In its proper place and rectified. So we said, Ya ma'ash al-ikhwa, that you'll find in Kitab al-Siyam and also the affairs that we're going to embark upon, that this matter is considered from the a'mal al-a'mal, which is done and professed, that is professed with the body, that is professed openly with the body. For Siyam, ya ma'ash al-ikhwa, a person would ask, as a Siyam is from those affairs in which the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had talked about certain types of ibadat. Some what is done with the heart, of course we know, which is the belief system. Then you have the actions that are done with the limbs and with money. You'll find that some was done physically, and then some is done financially, and some of them are done in other ways. or combined between all of those matters, which we'll talk about in a minute, don't worry. طيب, Ahl Ilm, you'll find that they arrange the chapter of worship based upon the hadith of Jibreel. And also the hadith of Abdullah bin Umar, which everyone inshallah is familiar with. That I have been commanded to kill and fight the people until they testify that none has the right to be worshipped except Allah. And that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah, and that they pay zakat, and they also perform the salat and pay zakat, and also perform the month of Ramadan, meaning fasting, and also pay the zakat, and also make hajj. طيب, based upon those two hadith, Jibreel and hadith Abdullah bin Umar, as we know, that has been arranged based upon those two narrations, which everyone is probably familiar with, that I hope they're familiar with, the hadith of Abdullah bin Umar and the hadith of, we know, is hadith Jibreel, where the Messenger of Allah has said about the affairs in which the religion are based upon, which is mentioned in those two narrations. It's not in your book. It's not in those. Trust me, brothers, when I make research, I don't just go by one book. I give information from different sources. طيب. So firstly, the hadith of Abdullah bin Umar, everyone I'm sure is familiar with, the hadith which the Messenger of Allah ﷺ said, that I've been commanded to fight the people until they testify that none has the right to be worshipped except Allah, and that Muhammad is the Messenger of Allah, and that they establish salah, and pay zakat, and also fast the month of what? Of Ramadan. طيب. So the Messenger of Allah ﷺ had explained and mentioned that Siyam is a pillar of the religion in which, number one, starting with the belief system, that one has to have the absolute conviction and creed and belief without any doubt or reluctancy that it is an obligation. As we know, brothers and sisters, if a person was to fast, let's just say 20 Ramadans or 20 months of Ramadan in his life, or 30 or 40, if he does not have the conviction in his heart that is obligatory and it's an obligation, that is a pillar that he's fulfilling, then that person, even his Islam is what? Is questionable. In which we know that denial of the obligation of one of the pillars of Islam will nullify one's Islam. So it's incumbent upon a person to what? Have the belief system, or have the i'tiqad, without any shadow of a doubt, of the obligations on which the Messenger of Allah made as pillars in which the religion is established upon. Even the salah, even zakah, and hajj, which we'll talk about, inshallah, in a little bit of details later. But you'll find that Ahl Ilm, that they arranged the chapter of Siyam based upon these two narrations, Hadith Jibreel and Hadith what? Abdullah bin Umar. And we're sure what everyone is familiar with if they was to read Arba'in al-Nawawiyah, which is in the first, after the most important of those narrations, in which he inaugurated his book called the 40 Hadith, after he talked about the Hadith of on the authority of Umar ibn Khattab, where he talked about the niyyah. So after the hadith or the narration between to the importance of one's intention, then these two hadith came directly after them. Hadith of Jibreel and the hadith of Abdullah ibn Umar. طيب. You'll find, ya ma'ashal ikhwa, especially in regards to the ahkam that's pertaining to the most important of the ibadat in the religion of Islam, starting with the belief system. Then after that came the other affairs such as what? Hajj, such as salah, siyam, zakat, and hajj. For example, you'll find when the ulama embark upon explaining these matters, especially the arkan or the pillars of the religion. For example, they start off with salah. You'll find in the chapter of salah, before salah, they started off will be the key to opening up the door of what? Salah, which is what? Which is tahara, purification. That's the key for opening up that particular worship. So you find in the books of fiqh, before salah, they'll give precedence to what? The mentioning, the affairs of what, everyone? Of wudu and things pertaining to what? Purification first. That will precede it. Then they embark upon explaining the affair of prayer. So you'll find that comes before, because we know that's the condition, or if you want to say the key to opening up the door of that particular worship is purification. So that's what you'll find, especially with how they arrange their books. And this is what they will do, and this is what they're accustomed to doing in a lot of their different authorings in their different books. And even in pertaining to Hajj, what is the key for opening up the affair of Hajj? Except that it is what? That, for example, Ihram. For verily the key for a person performing Hajj, before him entering or starting the rituals of Hajj, then he has to know the key of opening up that particular ibadah, which is starting from the miqat and entering in the state of Ihram. So similar to that, you'll find in pertaining to Siyam, likewise, the key to Siyam, as we'll talk about inshallah, the key to Siyam and opening up its doors, what everyone? Is the niyyah. That is the key for opening up the door to Siyam. As we know that one's Siyam is not valid unless he has the intention. No matter if he's to get up and fast and he did not have the intention, then we know that his fasting likewise is invalid. So the key for one's Siyam being valid relies upon the intention before Tulu' al-Fajr, before the sun rises, which we'll talk about inshallah. All the details are going to come. As we know linguistically as Siyam linguistically just means to refrain. Linguistically, as we know. As we know, it means to refrain or abstain or abstination. So that is the linguistic meaning of as-Siyam. You'll find a lot of Ahl Ilm of the past used to use the word Siyam, but it means, like we said, to refrain or to abstain. That's it, linguistically. Not the meaning in Kitab al-Sunnah. We didn't talk about that yet. طيب, as we know, Allah Ta'ala talks about what happened with Maryam bint Imran. As we know, as mentioned in his book, as Allah Ta'ala mentioned in his book, فَكُلِي وَاشْرَبِي وَقَرِّي عَيْنَا فَإِمَّا تَرِيَنَّ مِنَ الْبَشَرِ أَحَدًا فَقُولِي إِنِّي نَظَرْتُ لِلرَّحْمَنِ صَوْمًا فَلَنْ أُكَلِّمَ الْيَوْمَ إِنْسِيًّا. That we know the ayah which comes in Surah Maryam, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about in his book, and we're talking about the linguistic meaning of Siyam right now. We're speaking about the linguistic meaning in the Arabic language, not the meaning in Kitab al-Sunnah. The meaning in linguistically means just like we said, imtina' or imsak. It means to refrain and abstain. That's it. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in his book, فَكُلِي وَاشْرَبِي وَقَرِّي عَيْنَا. Eat and drink. Excuse me, everyone. I guess, like I told you, officially, I guess the allergy season has started. طيب. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Maryam, He said, فَكُلِي, eat and drink, and also may your eyes be cool. May you have coolness in your eye. As we know that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was talking about Maryam, radiyallahu anha, ardaha, la shak. That you'll find that it mentions when she gave birth to Isa, birth to Jesus, the son of Mary, and she was facing great difficulty, and she had no one to help her, as we know. And she was left out in a desolate place, pregnant. As we know, due to her family casted her out, thinking that she had committed an act that was abominable, where they thought, and they accused her of adultery, because how can you be pregnant without a man, or without any conception, without any type of intimacy? So they had casted her out, radiyallahu anha. They casted her out, made her an outcast and a derelict. They abandoned her. And we know she was in the desolate place without anyone to care for her. And I'm sure that women right now that's probably listening online, speaking about a woman that's 9 months pregnant, somewhere far in a remote place, by herself. How difficult that is. And on top of that, she started receiving now the last part of her pregnancy, where now the talq or the talaqat was starting to come. Where they know that what they call them, the contractions started to come. Now, I knew the Arabic word, I can't even think the English word, talaqat. Contractions. The contractions started to come after the 9 month. Then, like we said, she was by herself, far away, without anyone to help her. So I'm sure that every woman in here could think she had no mother with her, she had no one to care for her, alone. Then she had the contractions, and then she gave birth to Isa ibn Maryam. In that context is based upon the story what happened here. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent Jibreel to give her comfort. And it was mentioned, it says in the ayah, after she gave birth, eat and drink, and may you have coolness in your eye. And if you was to see anyone of man or anyone from human beings, then say to them, verily I took a vow to Rahman, Soma. I took a vow, made a vow to Ar-Rahman, Soma. Tafadal. Soma meaning I took a vow to Rahman to remain silent. So it doesn't necessarily mean the siyam of what we know, but notice it's speaking about that she wasn't supposed to what? Speak to anyone. So notice that Maryam described that as she was refraining from speech, not actually what? Fasting, as one would think the siyam is in the Kitab al-Sunnah. But based upon the context here, she was refraining from speaking to anyone. And that was the vow that she took with Allah Ta'ala in regards to her affair. So it says here, speaking about what happened with Maryam, notice she said in the ayah, إِنِّي نَظَرْتُ لِلرَّحْمَنِ سَوْمًا فَلَنْ أُكَلِّمَ الْيَوْمَ إِنْسِيًّا. Verily, I took a vow to Rahman not to speak to anyone. When she said Soma here, or Som, meaning refraining from speaking with anyone. So notice here in the context that Siyam, the meaning of it here is what, everyone? It means to abstain or refrain from speech. So that's the linguistic meaning, as we mentioned. And there's a lot of different ayat. As we know, Maryam also explained, and in this other ayat, explained what was her intention behind the word Siyam here. That says, فَلَنْ أُكَلِّمَ الْيَوْمَ إِنْسِيًّا. I will not speak to anyone, or I will not speak to anyone of mankind, or give him any type of speech. Because that was the vow that she took with Allah Ta'ala. There's other different types of poetry you'll find in which the Arab used to use, in order to show that the meaning of Siyam, that it means just to refrain from, linguistically. But it doesn't necessarily mean to abstain from food and drink. It could be abstination from speech. It could be abstination due to, for example, abstination of speech or abstination of movement. All of it, but depending on the context of how it is meant or how it's mentioned. And one would know what the meaning is for. طيب. As far as in the Kitab and Sunnah, as we know, the meaning of Siyam in Kitab and Sunnah is number one, التعبد لله تبارك وتعالى. Means for one to single out his worship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As we know, if one was to fast for other than Allah, I don't know what that is. I truly don't know. These commercials and these phones and seriously, they make you pay to take these off, even on all the different Islamic. Seriously. Wow. The ads on the different Islamic apps. You got to pay for something I didn't even ask for, huh? طيب. So he said in this regard, Ya ma'ash al-ikhwa, that the meaning of al-siyam, it is a ta'abbud lillah, to single out Allah Ta'ala by drawing close to Him in worship, by refraining from eating and drinking, as we know, and the rest of those affairs that will break your fast. So it's not just eating and drink, but the meaning of eating and drinking, as we'll discuss inshallah. And everything else that will break your fast from the time of Fajr all the way up until the sun sets, from Maghrib all the way up to the sun fully sets. So the first thing we mentioned is said that is to single out Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His worship. So, in order to put in reality, in proper perspective, the importance of Siyam, al-Siyam is embarking upon one purifying his ubudiyya of Allah, his servitude, and his subservience for Allah, Ta'ala, in his preparation for death and meeting Allah, Siyam is the best way for one to purify his servitude and his subservience and his worship for Allah. So that's how one should look at it. That fasting for Allah Ta'ala is part of actualizing your ubudiyyah of Allah. Part of actualizing and purifying your ubudiyyah. Your ubudiyyah meaning your servitude and your worship and you being a servant of Allah Ta'ala. So Siyam is one of those affairs that aids one in actualizing the servitude and subservience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, subhanahu jalla fil ula. I don't think that's anyone's car. Does it sound like it? So someone's alarm sounds like that. Oh, okay. Oh, it went off. طيب. So that's what we mentioned and said firstly, as this is the most important part of the definition. As you'll find a lot of the fuqaha or the scholars of fiqh in their ta'rif or their definition of siyam, usually you'll find that they forget to mention this. And this is very important. To mention that it is a ta'abbud lillahi tabarak wa ta'ala. It is ta'abbud. When we say ta'abbud again, meaning is one actualizing his ubudiyyah, his servitude and his worship by singling out Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in worship by fasting. And we said that the meaning of fasting is to what? To refrain from eating and drink and the rest of the affairs that will break his fast. As we'll get inside the details of that, inshallah. From the time of Fajr all the way up to what? All the way up and when the time or when it sets. Some of Ahl Ilm mention and say that the meaning of fasting, if you want to put down a second definition, some of them say that it means, of course, singling out worship with Allah, but they say by refraining with the intention. By refraining with the intention. This is the second one. By refraining with the intention of with refraining by the intention, I'm sorry to say of, but from those affairs that break one's fast, which is tangible and intangible. From those affairs that break one's fast, whether it be tangible or intangible. Don't worry, I'm going to explain it. Tangible or intangible. From the second Fajr to the what? To when the sun sets. Notice here it says the what? The second Fajr. Don't worry, we're going to give all the details in it. Alhamdulillah, here in the land we live in, we don't have to worry about the second Fajr. But in the lands of the Muslims, especially in Saudi, walillahi alhamd, those who are upholding the Islam in these certain countries, you'll find that they make two adhans. One adhan is maybe 40 minutes approximately, depending on what part of the world or what part of the land you're in or which country you're in. Some of them will call the adhan maybe 40 minutes before the second adhan, in order for the people to wake up, in order for the people either to pray tahajjud or for the people to prepare for their fast by making their pre-dawn meal, which is called as-sahur. In certain countries, they'll call another adhan prior before the true Fajr. There's another what? Adhan, which we'll talk about, inshallah, will come. Don't worry. So that's the second definition. The second definition is what, everyone? Means to draw close to Allah by imsak, by refraining with the intention. From those affairs that break your fast, whether it be tangible or intangible. From the second adhan until the sun sets. So it's a little different from the first. This is a second one, which some of Ahl Ilm mentioned, and both of them are correct. Notice that we said in this definition here, what, everyone? A niyyah. There has to be a what? There has to be what, everyone? Has to be intention. The intention is very important in fast, which we'll discuss and give numerous examples on which we're going to cover, inshallah. Don't worry. But one has to, before he goes to sleep, to always have his intention. Does he utter it verbally with his lips? We say no. One does not utter it or verbalize it with his lips. That is an innovative practice. in which we'll talk about, like we said, when we get time. There's certain ibadat. Allergy season has started, I could tell. There's certain ibadat that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam commanded us to verbalize before we enter or do it. Such as, for example, when a person passes the miqat, then one utters, Labbaik Allahumma Umrah. O Allah, answer for you to perform Umrah. Here the Messenger of Allah commanded, there's a text. But certain ibadat, the Messenger of Allah did not what? Command that. So since that is the case, then one should adhere to what the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave specific instructions in those different various forms of ibadat. Some he said to verbalize, and certain things and certain affairs he said, or there has not been any text to say to verbalize it. Rather, like we said, these are one of the examples that one does not verbalize his intention. Is it clear what I'm saying, everyone? But the intention, as we know, mahalluha al-qalb, that its place is of the heart. Its place is of the heart. One's siyam will never be correct unless he has the intention before he goes to sleep. Before the prior night, before he closes his eyes, it makes it rather than coming upon him to be sure that he went to sleep while he intended to fast the next day. Is it enough just to fast or make the intention at the beginning of the month, or should he renew it every day? All that we'll talk about in its due time, inshallah. But if one wants to do it just to be on the safe side, for every night he renews his niyyah, then that is the best way in which we'll discuss, inshallah. That before he closes his eyes and go to sleep, that he makes sure that his intention is to fast the following day. We'll talk about that, inshallah. Fine. As we know, the intention is very important. Due to what we know as what all the people have memorized in Arba'een al-Nawawiyah, which comes at Arba'een al-Nawawiyah. I'm sure everyone is familiar with the 40 hadith of Imam al-Nawawi. That he inaugurated that book with the most important key to every affair and every action is based upon that hadith of Umar al-Khattab, which I'm sure everyone is familiar with, where the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had talked about on the authority of Abu Hafs, Umar al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu, where he heard the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam say, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَا نَوَى فَمَنْ كَانَتْ هِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ فَهِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ فَمَنْ كَانَتْ هِجْرَتُهُ لِلدُّنْيَا وَامْرَأَةٍ يُصِيبُهَا من كانت الهجرة لدنيا أو امرأة ينكحها فهجرته إلى ما هاجر إليه. As we know, the first part of the hadith, and the Messenger of Allah said that verily actions are based upon one's niyat, and everybody will have what they intended. If his migration is for Allah and His Messenger, then his migration will be for Allah and His Messenger. But if his niyyah, his intention is for some type of worldly affair or mundane affair, or a woman he wants to marry, then his intention, or he will have what he or she intended. Fine. That is to show, and we talked about here, Ya ma'ashal ikhwa wal akhawat, that the most important of the affair, especially in Siyam and month of Ramadan, is the niyyah, and that is the door of opening up the legislated fast. For a person which to abstain, if he was to abstain from food and drink without the intention prior, then that's just called fasting linguistically, not in the Kitab and Sunnah. Is it clear what I'm saying, everyone? That's just a fast linguistically. Or if you want to say just a healthy fast, in which we'll discuss, inshallah, that one should also not make his intention for some type of worldly benefits to obtain some type of rectification of his body or he or she's body. If one wanted to use Siyam as a form of remedy or some type of form of medicine to cure certain ailments or illnesses, there's no problem with that. But in the month of Ramadan, one fast in order to what? Draw close to Allah Ta'ala. And the benefits that happen, that follows behind it, then we just say that those benefits happen to follow behind Siyam, in which that was in our initial what? Intention to attain. But if those benefits happen to your body, then alhamdulillah, that's just from the fruits and the benefits in which Allah has given the individual in this month, in that blessed month, and in that month, and likewise the tremendous reward he will attain in the hereafter. But at the end of the day, one does not try to make the intention for him to attain the physical benefits of it being a remedy in the month of Ramadan. If it happens, alhamdulillah. And he's attained a benefit on the top of another benefit. Not only drawing close to Allah or drawing close to his sins being forgiven, but if he has some physical benefits, alhamdulillah. But that's not our initial what? Intention for it. But certain people come out of the month of Ramadan with certain sicknesses and ailments cured. But that is not our initial what? Intention. Rather, one is doing it for the month of Ramadan in order to draw close to Allah Ta'ala and to hope for his mercy and to also have his sins forgiven. Pipe. As we know, the beginning of the month of Ramadan that it started, or the obligation, was upon it being in a matter what they call a takhyir. It was in the form of one having the alternative or the choice in the beginning, in the very beginning. As you'll know that certain affairs in the religion, well, alhamdulillah, that it was upon certain what? Certain levels. Allah Ta'ala, for example, certain affairs didn't start off with the affair being obligatory in the beginning. Rather, it became, as I say, a tadarruj, that it gradually became obligatory. In the beginning, siyam was not obligatory. It was not obligatory in the beginning. Rather, one had the option to either what? He had the option to fast, or he had the option to what? To feed. That was in the very beginning. Is it clear what I'm saying so far? That was in the very beginning. As we know, like we said, the hikmah of why you'll find that Allah Ta'ala, that He made certain affairs gradual. For example, as we know, before the other affairs of fiqh, the affairs of, for example, of leaving all drinking, or certain affairs of for pertaining, for example, for example, if that was pertaining to abstaining from certain affairs, especially the rest of the ahkam or the branches of the religion, those affairs did not come until the actual important and the most fundamental and the essential affairs was what? Deep rooted in the hearts of the people, which was the monotheism. That's why you'll find that was the most important, in which Allah Ta'ala had gradually set down the revelation, but made its focus primarily what? Upon the tawheed of Allah and the affairs of the unseen and the affairs of the i'tiqad. That was the main important affairs in the first 13 years. Was there fasting and salat? Yes, there was. There was fasting and there was salat. But you'll find that the majority of the affairs of the i'tiqad was the primary focus in the beginning of the revelation. The primary focus was the rectification of the people's minds and their hearts and their belief system. That was the what? That's the quintessence of where everything else falls in its place. If that's set right, then everything else, once the rest of the ahkam, or the rest of the part of Revelation was revealed, then they would what? They would adhere to it. In contrast, you'll find a great example of what Abdullah ibn Mas'ud and also Aisha that she mentioned and said. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud said that the first that was revealed to us was a mufassal. He said that the first that was revealed was what they call the mufassal, meaning the affairs of the mughayyabat, or the affairs of the belief system. When he said the mufassal, he meant by that, for example, about affairs connected with tawheed, the affairs connected with leaving off shirk, the affairs of the unseen, about the belief in the angels, about the belief in the hereafter, all those matters. All that is the what? The foundation. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gradually sent down a revelation, starting off with the most important, until the rest of the ahkam was what? Revealed. Aisha mentioned a tremendous point, our mother, radiallahu anha, where she said, he says, وَلَوْ قِيلَ لَنَا أُتْرُكِ الزِّنَا وَلَمْ نَبْدَأ بِالْأَسَاسِ لَقُلْنَا لَنْ نَتْرُكِ الزِّنَا أَبَدًا وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَنَا أُتْرُكِ الْخَمْرِ ولم نبدأ بهذا الأساس وهذا المبدأ لقلنا لن نشرب الخمر أبدا. Basically, she's saying how you'll find how the revelation was revealed gradually, bit by bit, and in a certain order, where Aisha, our mother, gave a great point, gave a great explanation in this regard. She said, if we had not started with those affairs of the belief system, meaning the fundamental principles of the religion, if we had not started those affairs and we did not lay down our foundation in ourselves, it would have been said to us, leave off fornication. He said, if the people had not started with that, they would have said, we would never leave fornication off. And if it was said to us, if we have not started with the foundation, it was said to us, leave off drinking and intoxicants, and we have not started off with that foundation, we would have said we would never stop drinking intoxicants. So that was to show that what everyone, that you'll find that the affair started in this manner, and this is how Allah Ta'ala revealed certain parts of the revelation, especially in this regard. Well, Siyam likewise was in that same type of what? The same type of gradual process, and what we're mentioning now. So at first it was, number one, based upon fasting. A person had the choice. He had the alternative. So fasting was pertaining. Yarhamakallah. I think Siyam. If Salat comes in 2 minutes. 2 minutes, I think. So it comes at 8:36. Very fast. Right. So we said at the beginning of the revelation that Siyam was upon one's own alternative and choice. He had the choice. He could choose to fast or either feed the poor. From the Muslimun. So we'll talk about that inshallah. Certain people have said that and think in the month of Ramadan when they want to feed, that they feed non-Muslims. No. The month of Ramadan, one feeds, it starts off with the Muslim, rather his feeding is for the Muslimun, for the Muslims. And certain others, and we'll talk about inshallah, there is certain ahkam where one can feed from those who are non-Muslims, but I'll talk about that later. But the month of Ramadan, that is for the Muslimun. It's for the Muslimun. For feeding the Muslims. That is the only one. That is what will correct one's feeding in order to what? In order to take its place of Siyam, if one is sick or what have you, depending on his situation. Right. So then the second, after Siyam, after it was upon choice, then it became upon, does anyone know what was the second level? Does anyone know? Siyam. It's highly recommended here. Right. Then Siyam, we'll talk about inshallah, the second level, is when it became obligatory, but a person will have to fast all the way up to what? To Maghrib. And he only can eat from Maghrib to Isha. That was it. And the condition, he had to be awake. If he fell asleep after Maghrib and he did not eat, if he went to sleep, especially before Isha, then he had to start his Siyam over again. He has to renew his Siyam and he has to start it. So his Siyam will start technically from either, number one, from the time when he went to sleep, or from Isha, all the way up to the following Maghrib for the next day. Let's talk about that, don't worry, at another time. So if one was to fast, this was during the time of the Prophet. He said, alhamdulillah, you don't have to worry about that. That's from Allah's mercy. We're just telling you the order of how it gradually went to the level of what it is now. That was the second one. The second level was that a person would fast all the way up to Maghrib, and with two conditions. He could eat after Maghrib, of course, with the condition that he does not sleep. He can't go to sleep. He has to eat. He has all the way up to Al-Isha. That's it. After the Isha. Then he has to start his fasting over again. And if he went to sleep after Maghrib, then he cannot eat at all. Until, as we know, what happened with some of the Sahaba. From them was Umar al-Khattab. Where you'll find, I'll bring the story inshallah, what happened to Umar and what happened to another Sahabi when one passed out. And Umar al-Khattab fell into being intimate with his wife. Umar al-Khattab fell into being intimate with his wife. Yes. Yeah, I mentioned the story last year. So Umar even fell into being intimate And one of the Sahaba had also what? Fell asleep. So the affair was what? Difficult upon some of the Sahaba. They came to the Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam, and tell the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam when he heard what happened to these great Sahabi, then the ayat was revealed. That Allah Ta'ala mentions says, where he says, فالآن باشروهن وابتغوا ما كتب الله لكم وكلوا واشربوا حتى يتبين لكم الخيط الأبيض من الخيط الأسود من الفجر. For the first part, we'll go back to the other ayah before that, where he said, علم الله أنكم كنتم تختانون أنفسكم فتاب عليكم وعفى عنكم. That's the ayah. He said, verily Allah knows, he says, of what you were facing of difficulty. And he's accepted your tawbah and he's forgiven you. So go to them and seek to be what? Intimate with them or what have you. To the end of the ayah. We'll talk about that in its due time. But at any rate, just to give just everyone a glimpse of how Siyam started and the levels that it started in this manner. Started in this manner when one had the choice, and then Siyam was all the way up to Maghrib. From Maghrib to Isha, that's all you had to eat. With the condition that you did not fall asleep. You fell asleep, khalas, done. Time to start all over again. And like we said, some of the Sahaba, one of them, he fell out. He fell out, and he went home, and he went to sleep. Until his wife woke him up and said, Khaybatan lak, animt. She said to him, Khaybatan lak. He said, you destroyed yourself. You went to sleep. She knew that the hukm was, if you go to the sleep, then what? You have to start over again, and until that's when he went back to his mazra'ah, or the vegetation or the crops or the agriculture he was he was watching over or working in, that he fell out in the garden. And then that's when we know that the ayah that was revealed pertaining to that. Who wants to call the other? I'm sorry. I forgot. Sheikh. Assalamu alaikum wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum. Say it again. What happened? We'll talk about that, inshallah. No, certain parts of Alaska, they get probably 1 hour, probably 1 hour a day, and sometimes they 1 or 2 hours of darkness. We'll talk about that, inshallah, don't worry. Allah Akbar, Allah Akbar. Allah Akbar, Allah Akbar. Allah Akbar, Allah. آتِ محمد الوصية الفضيلة والبعث المقام محمود الذي وعده. طيب. So that was the marahil, if you want to say the marahil or the different marahil or the stages that Siyam was, of what it used to be until it became of what we know today, where a person starts his fast from the time of the second Fajr. But we talked about here in this country, there is no second Fajr. There's only one Fajr at the time when it comes in, and that's it. When we said second Fajr, that's dependent on the country. If one was in the land of Tawheed, which is today, currently known as Saudiya, then we know they have 2 adhans before Fajr. They have what they call Al-Fajr Al-Kadib, or the adhan is the Fajr Al-Kadib. They say that's not the real adhan. But however it is utilized as a what? Alarm. to have everyone up to either pray, like we said, either pray witr or pray tahajjud or prepare for their what? Fast. Then that's not the real adhan. Then we have the second adhan, which is the true adhan. That is the adhan where the actual time of Fajr is in now. So for here, I don't want anyone to walk out of here thinking said the second Fajr. All right, second adhan? What are you talking about? They think there's a second adhan, and then they wake up late, the sun is coming up, I'm supposed to wait for a second adhan. No, we're talking about a second adhan depending on what land you're in. In your land of the Muslims, they do have two adhans for Fajr. The one that comes in before the actual time, and then the second which is the actual time for the Salat al-Fajr. Is it clear what I'm saying, everyone? طيب. So, the third marhala, or the third stage of Siyam is what we know now, in which, like we said, one starts at the time of Fajr, all the way up to the time of what? Of Maghrib. All the way up to the time when the sun sets. And then one can eat and drink all the way up to Fajr again. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had His mercy upon us, where one can eat and drink and relax and even be intimate with his family after that time. And that's enough time and ample time for one to relax and enjoy himself all the way up to the second Fajr. Up to the next Fajr for the following morning to prepare for his next fast. طيب. Similar to that, as we know, we have different examples of that in regards to, for example, of when the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam prohibited certain affairs. For example, in a certain part of the revelation, the Messenger of Allah prohibited that the Sahaba visit graves, as we know. But as the revelation passed and the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught them the proper aqidah, and the aqidah became settled in their heart, then we know that the hukum changed. So as you'll find in affairs of usul al-fiqh, they talk about this. This is a type of not a type of knowledge-based science, where you say it goes from it being easy to being hard to being in the middle, or for example, it being the highest of prohibition, then going less. There's different certain affairs in the religion that does that. For example, in regards to the prohibition of visiting graves, it started from the highest of what was prohibited to what? Till it was a little bit less, based upon certain conditions, right? Then you'll find certain matters, like as we know towards the end of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did permit them to visit the graves with the condition, that, of course we know the person's belief system has to be in order and intact, so there's no fear that you'll fall into polytheism, and they will have to be a person that of course a man, that he would not wail, or all those different affairs of what will fall into be, or will be considered a prohibition, and especially with the women, that they cannot do it consistently, and that they have to have a strong belief system, and that it reminds them of the hereafter. That's it. No more, no less. So either to make dua for the person or the Muslim, the person goes to the grave in one or two affairs. No more, there's no third. To make dua for the Muslimun, and to remind him of Of death. That's it. No more, no less. طيب. In regards to now, for example, khamr, as we talked about this before, as khamr likewise was made in gradual steps. As khamr at one time was as a person in the beginning of the revelation could do it. Yes, it was. He could do it. As it started off with the most important affair, which is the tawheed and the ibadat and the foundation of the religion. So, Allah Ta'ala just sent down an admonition saying that this affair is that one should not do it when he wants to perform his ibadah. Like, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu la taqrabu as-salata wa antum sukara. Oh, you believe, do not go near the prayer while you're intoxicated. So it started off like that. Then the second, it became It became highly detested. It became highly detested. And Allah Ta'ala revealed the ayah pertaining to how this affair is How this affair is satanic and is hated, that one should do it. Then the third level came when it was absolutely prohibited. Absolutely prohibited. So that is the degree, especially in Siyam, the same thing. So this is just to enlighten some of the brothers, showing that the affair is of these different degrees, especially pertaining to Siyam and other different affairs of the religion. And at a certain point, it was even prohibited for them to drink in certain vessels. As we'll talk about that, inshallah, as far as intoxicants. Not only was it made impermissible, but certain vessels they used to drink it out of was also what? They couldn't drink out of it. Out of fear that it would be a reason for them being tempted to what? Drink intoxicants or alcohol or consume it. So all these matters is to show that at that particular time that all these affairs were what? Taking place. طيب. Before we end it, the first lesson, inshallah, Allah Ta'ala has made different aspects of worship or made it diverse, made it of different types, made it a variety. Why? In order for the one who's been obliged upon him, meaning him or her, to carry out these affairs as a test. So Allah Ta'ala tests them to see which of these affairs they can what? They can do, or they will what? Stand out in, or giving them the option for where one will be diligent in one, whereas one will be easy for him and then the other might be slightly difficult. As we know, certain people, it's easy for them to pray salah. You'll find even prayer at night, it's easy for them. But maybe perhaps they are very, very stingy people. So that's their test. Their test is in the affair of what? Their test is in the affair of money. So Allah Ta'ala made these affairs of worship various type to test them. Because you have, like we said, worship where a person is easy upon them to pray, for example, tahajjud or praying night prayer. But in the affairs of giving money and giving wealth for the cause of Allah, they're very what? Very, very stingy, or they're a person that's very frugal. For example, especially with the great Imam that he mentions here, listen to what he says. He said, ثم اعلم أن حكمة الله عز وجل أن الله نوع العبادات في التكليف ليختبر المكلف كيف يكون امتثاله لهذه الأنواع فهل يمتثل ويقبل ما يوافق طبعه أو يمتثل ما به رضا الله عز وجل. He goes on to say this. He said, for a person, will he carry out these different types? For example, will he carry out, will he accept, will agree with his what? With his nature, for example. He said, for you verily, if you used to contemplate on the different types of worship, salat, zakat, som, hajj, you'll find that some of it is just pertaining to the human body, and that's it. Some of it is just pertaining to what? One's wealth, and that's it. Or you'll find that, for example, some of it is comprised of both. He said, some of it is combined with both. Until Allah Ta'ala, for example, makes clear the one who is what? Stingy, for the one who's free-hearted, or he's kind-hearted, and he's free-handed. For verily, certain people it's easy upon them for certain affairs than others. For example, certain people can give wealth with no problem. It's not a burden upon them to be free-hearted or be free-handed or what have you. But it might be hard for him to what? Pray his salah. It's hard for him, and it's a burden upon the prayer. Pray his what? Extra prayer, especially. As we know, the prayers are our duties. There's no excuse for that. He said, but however, the Sharia, or the Kitab and Sunnah, came in order to make it variety, to break it down, and to give everyone the opportunity. He says, in order for it to be known of those who will carry out and actualize the true worship of Allah, or the one who will be the one to follow his desires. So this salat, for example, as we talked about, is ibadah that's just done physically by the body. And what is obligatory for it, for example, and what is not obligatory in regards to that of money. So salat is just purely physical. The person does not need wealth for as far as in regards to salat, but just his body and one being having the ability or the physical capability. As far as in regards to certain matters, zakah. Zakah is just purely what? Wealth. And what a person might need as far as in regards is just purely wealth. But a person might need, of course, some type of effort in putting towards counting his money to know what he's supposed to give. It does enter into that. But mostly it's considered what? It's considered as done with one's wealth. And also, of course, we know a person needs to have understanding of knowing who is the individual that deserves to receive it. Who's the one that also deserves it. Follows behind that, no doubt. And that also enters in the affairs of what? Worship. However, we said the zakah is done with purely, of course we know, initially with one's wealth. Hajj, as we know, in order for one to do it, then he has to have the physical capability, and he has to have the what? Financial, both. He has to have both. 4, especially except for the people of Ahl Mecca, the people of Mecca already, then we'll talk about that later. In regards to jihad, jihad also needs one's wealth, and he needs one's what? Physical wealth, physical capability, both. So all these is just to show how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had made various types of affairs to give one opportunity to take advantage of the initiative to attain a reward on which is easy upon him, even though he's been obliged to carry out all those affairs. But for one to have the opportunity to where it is easy upon him, facilitated to him, for him to stand out in that particular worship. But even though it's been obliged or been obligatory upon us to carry out what is a duty, but to go beyond that or was voluntary or supererogatory, then we know that some people are better than what? Than others. Is it clear what I'm saying, everyone? That some people are better than others. We'll stop here, inshallah. We'll start to get inside the book later on, inshallah, as far as regards to the other affairs I wanted to speak about. So we'll stop here, inshallah. Sallallahu wa sallam. I think we did Iqamah. We came about 3 minutes ago. Allahumma salli wa sallam barak ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك واشهد ان لا اله الا انت استغفرك واتوب اليك.